Meanwhile, the Senate preparing to return to Capitol Hill tomorrow. The House will stay home. Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell declining an offer of quick COVID-19 tests offered by the White House. They say those tests should go to frontline workers.
It comes as anti-lockdown protests continue across the country. Demonstrators seen here in Nevada storming the state's capital, demanding officials lift restrictions. Similar protests across the country. Guys, good morning and welcome to the halfway mark of the Sunday edition of Fox and Friends. Jillian, good to see you here in Studio F. And Jason Chaffetz, our good friend out in Utah. How are you, Jason?
Oh, glad to be with you. Glad to be with you. This is going to be fun. We had Congressman Jim Himes. I feel so bad that I had to cut him off a little early. We had a hard out. But we also have somebody else I served with in Congress, one of the hardest working people I know in Congress. It's Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia. He was the ranking member, but now since he's running for the United States Senate, but he is joining us this morning, and we're thrilled to have him here. And Congressman, I want to tell you, the government is asking postal workers to go to work, and they're managing to do it. But Nancy Pelosi doesn't seem to want Congress to go back to work. What's up with that?
Oh, Jason, you know this. She likes being in control. As long as she can keep us out of there, it's just leadership that makes decisions. We've seen this before. And when she can centralize the leadership, then she centralizes the focus on her instead of the American people, instead of the agenda. Speaker Pelosi has made this more about her and her agenda than she has what the president has done. The president has been leading. The president has been leading from out front, him and the vice president. They've been doing what needs to be done. We need to start coming back in, but yet Speaker Pelosi seems to want to hold those brakes because she likes to hold the control. That's what it seems like to us, because there's no reason the House should not be beginning to come back in. We can make the arrangements. We can do what we need to do. But I believe this is about control. We've seen it from Speaker Pelosi through sham impeachment, through Mueller, through everything. She likes to have control, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, Congressman, the president giving her every opportunity. But here's a joint statement, raised an eyebrow for me, from Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, saying Congress is grateful for the administration's generous offer to deploy rapid COVID-19 testing capabilities to Capitol Hill. But we respectfully decline the offer at this time. Our country's testing capacities are continuing to scale up nationwide, and Congress wants to keep directing resources to the frontline facilities where they can do the most good most quickly. Well, the president tweeted in response to that saying, no reason to turn it down except politics. We have plenty of testing. Maybe you need a new doctor over there. Crazy Nancy will use it as an excuse not to show up to work. I'm not quite sure why Mitch McConnell signed on to that joint statement, since he's opening up the Senate. But is there any conceivable reason? I mean, you said control, and that's right. But the nation's business is supposed to be happening here, and she's AWOL.
Well, it is. And I mean, look, we can make all the jokes. She may like her ice cream in San Francisco. I mean, she might like staying home, flying back and forth. But again, it's about control. And I think this is the concern for most of us. I've been working 24/7, it seems like, for the last little bit on the response here in Georgia. I've been having to do it from my home. I've been going out to our office. We've been doing the things that need to be safe. But it's also time for us to get back and start looking ahead. And when we start looking at not only the response that we've had, let's make sure that we can have our committee hearings to make sure the proper aid is going where it needs to be going. We've had people who've not been getting aid. Why is that true? Let's make sure that we're doing what we should do in Congress. But then we've also, frankly, we've got to look forward. Our country is reopening. We've got National Defense Authorization Act. We've got appropriations bills. It's time for us to get back and show leadership. Leadership leads from the front, not from the back. Nancy Pelosi needs to bring the House back in, or at least have a plan to do so. Right now, we don't even have a plan to come back in.
Let's talk about some of these states that are going to be reopening, easing restrictions, I should say, tomorrow. You can take a look at the map here, 11 states. And in Georgia, Georgia's been the topic of a lot of conversation the last week. Some businesses have chosen to open, others have not. Here's a quote from the Georgia Restaurant Owners Group, and this reads, quote, restaurant operators understand the serious challenge ahead of our industry and our enormous responsibility to manage this crisis thoughtfully. We agreed that it's in the best interest of our employees, our guests, our community, and our industry to keep our dining rooms closed at this time. Recognizing that each operator faces incredibly difficult decisions on the path ahead, we affirm the fact that public safety is the top priority as we navigate the challenge. Sir, at least they have the choice to be able to reopen, if they want, but some people are choosing not to, and that's their decision. But other states, they don't have the choice right now.
That's right. It's time. I mean, the president has made it very clear. It's time to move our country toward reopening, and he's put out the guidelines that are there. We don't need to get ahead of the guidelines. We need to follow what the task force has said. But as we do so, like here in Georgia, things are beginning to open back up. Those that want to open back have that ability to open back up. We've got to understand that this virus did not affect every state the same way, and not even inside the state the same way. And there's got to be flexibility for those places that were not hit as heavy that they can open back up to not just blanketly do something. It's like punishing the whole class when only one person was doing something wrong. We can't just make blanket assessments. That's why local involvement is important. And that's why we're seeing businesses be able to make that choice. It's time we start looking at the health benefits, but also the economic crisis that we're in as well, and make sure we move forward so that people have choices and they can make those choices. It's always been much better than government having to make those choices for them.
Yeah, Congressman, I think you're absolutely right. If a business chooses not to open, that's their right as well. But in this little time we have left, I want to get your take on this General Flynn situation. You know, there's this deep concern. You and I personally have both been involved in this about the upper echelon of the FBI. I worry that it has not been cleaned up, but the revelation of these new documents and these new notes about the intent and the planning, the ambush, if you will, that happened with General Flynn there in the White House. What's your take on that, and where do you see that going next?
Jason, I'm glad you brought that up, because you and I and many others have been looking at this. We know that this was going on. We could tell it. We could sense it through the documents. We knew that if we could just continue to find out, we would see that the corrupt cabal that was over there of Comey and Page and Strzok and McCabe were moving toward this. And Jim Comey, who, you know, this whole process has brought out the fact that he used, and he said it, used the first weeks of the administration to attack basically this presidency. He had already been doing it through the candidacy. Just shows that the S on his chest that he wants to say is Superman is simply shame. I want to also remind your viewers, this is important. If they can do this to General Flynn, they can do it to anybody. But remember, McCabe, Mr. Andrew McCabe was one that actually approved this, went along with it. He lied to his own colleagues, was not charged. He was fired, but he was never charged. But yet they charged General Flynn with lying, not the Russian collusion. This has nothing been more than an attack on a candidate and then on a sitting president. That's why this has to be investigated and has to stop.
Well, there is an investigation ongoing. The president referred to it yesterday in a tweet. He said the Russia hoax is the biggest political scandal in American history. Treason. Let's see how this ends. Question mark. So you've got Bill Barr, you've got Durham out there doing this investigation. What sense, reports are they've been in communication very regularly. Where does this end?
Well, Bill Barr set a great standard on investigating what happened here in the corruption outlook. He also appointed another U.S. Attorney Jensen to actually look into this Flynn case. And I think that's why you're seeing movement now. But when you see notes come in that where they actively were targeting General Flynn, they were actively subverting what should happen in the rules and protocols that they should have, I think Durham is building a case. I think Durham has got access to everything that he needs. And it's also why I believe you see a lot of the what I'll call the cabal scurrying around, because they're scared of what's going on. I think we're going to see accountability. That's what we've all wanted from day one, and it's time to do that. You should never be able to attack a candidate for president just because you don't like him, to have insurance policies or whatever else you want. You can attack them and use the FISA court and use the other methods at your availability. Because like I said, if they can do it to a candidate and a president, they can do it to you and me.
Well, and I think it's hard for a lot of people in the public who watch and, you know, they look at the headlines and they see all the back and forth. And for a lot of people who then might lose faith in, you know, our officials, that now more than ever, it's important that we have that.
Oh, very much so. Look, it's serving a public trust, and it's being out there and making sure that we're accountable to people. And you can't be in a position at the Department of Justice. The Obama Department of Justice had become a political haven at the top, especially. We saw that interacted with the Clinton email situation. Then we saw it with the Russia investigation. And then we saw it just manifold itself into what we knew as Mueller and then into the impeachment. So this has just been something that's going on, and people don't need to forget it, because the tendency in Washington is that bureaucrats want you to forget it, and this corrupt cabal would love for you to forget it.
They very much want you to forget it.